The day begins in stillness. Long before the sky turns from charcoal to blue, before birds stretch their wings or wind moves through the yew trees outside the cloister walls, Brother Aelric is already awake. His breath rises faintly in the cold, unlit cell he calls his own, just a cot, a rough wool blanket, and a wooden crucifix carved long ago by a monk whose name has been worn away with time. The bell has not yet rung. But Aelric, who tends the monastery's herb garden and apothecary, often rises before it does. He values these minutes when the world is not yet formed. In the dimness, he runs his fingers over the spine of a prayer book, whispers a psalm beneath his breath, then pulls his robe tighter around him. His sandals are cold as he steps out onto the stone floor and makes his way through the long corridor, its arched ceiling echoing even the quietest footfall. Past the scriptorium, where others will later copy ancient text by candlelight. Past the chapel, where the smell of wax and old incense lingers even when no one is inside. Down the narrow stone steps and into the walled courtyard where his garden rests. This garden, the herbarium, is his sacred space. The air is damp. Mist clings to the low walls and the dew turns the edges of the thyme silver. Rows of beds, laid out with monastic precision, hold humble but powerful plants: comfrey, rue, chamomile, betony, pennyroyal, valerian, angelica. A few have flowered. Most are in quiet preparation for winter. Brother Aelric moves slowly among them, not to gather yet, but simply to observe. His breath is steady. He leans over a patch of marigold, gently touching a petal with 2 fingers. Still bright, he murmurs. The bees are still sleeping, their hives tucked safely behind the chapel wall. By the time the first bell rings matins, it is still dark, but the horizon has softened. Aelric returns to the chapel and joins the other brothers in soft chant. Latin echoes off stone. No one speaks. There are only voices rising, fading, rising again like gentle tides. After prayers, they eat in silence. A crust of bread, a little goat's cheese, watered ale. The prior reads aloud from the scriptures, his voice low and rhythmic. The clink of bowls, the rustle of cloth, and the occasional cough are the only other sounds. Aelric eats slowly, his thoughts already returning to the garden, to the leaves that need drying, the roots that must be dug before frost. With the sun now gently rising, the day's work begins. Aelric collects a small satchel and his worn knife. The blade is not sharp, not anymore, but it serves him well enough. He lifts a simple straw hat from its peg. It belonged to Brother Mathoy's before he passed and makes his way to the far corner of the cloister where the soil is richest and slightly shaded by the great elm tree. Today he needs borage for fever, yarrow for wounds, and perhaps a few sprigs of tansy if the frost hasn't spoiled them. He kneels on the ground, his robe gathering dust and burrs, and begins to cut with care. Each stem is inspected, each leaf gently cleaned of clinging earth. He mutters the Latin names under his breath as he works, a quiet chant to keep his mind focused. Virago officinalis, Achillea millefolium, tenecidum vulgar. In the distance, he hears Brother Wilfrid feeding the chickens, the cluck and scatter of straw breaking the silence. Aelric does not look up. The herbs demand his full attention. Each one is gathered not with haste, but with reverence. These are not weeds. They are, in his mind, the arms of God's subtle, quiet remedies placed upon the earth for healing. He does not harvest more than he needs. He never does. It is a sin, he believes, to take more than the ill can use or the land can offer. Once his satchel is full, he stands slowly. His knees creak. He brushes soil from his robe and wipes his hands against the hem. The morning light is warm now, golden and stretching across the damp stones of the cloister walk. He walks back toward the apothecary, past Brother Cuthbert, who nods in passing, his arms full of firewood. Aelric smiles, but does not speak. Inside the apothecary, the officina, as it's called, Aelric breathes in deeply. The small room is packed floor to ceiling with jars, dried bundles of herbs hanging from beams, rows of labeled vials, and a long table stained with decades of tincture work. Light filters through a small round window. It is quiet here, always quiet. He places the fresh herbs on the table, separating them by type. A tray is prepared, one for drying, one for immediate tincture work. The yarrow will be washed, chopped, and boiled in wine. The borage will be hung to dry in the rafters. The tansy, if it is not bitter with age, may be crushed into a poultice for aches. He begins with the tincture. The process is slow. Wine is poured into a ceramic bowl. The fire beneath is lit. Aelric stands back and waits as the liquid warms, then adds the finely chopped yarrow, stirring gently with a wooden stick. The scent rises green, sharp, old. He lowers the flame and lets it simmer. Outside, bells ring again terse the mid-morning hour. He says a quick prayer and continues. When the tincture is ready, he pours it through a linen cloth into a tall bottle. The wine is darker now, the bitterness of the herb infused into it. He corks the bottle and writes a small label, his script neat and slow. Yarrow tincture, for bleeding and bruises, in nomen Domini. It joins the others on the shelf, lined up like quiet sentinels. He pauses to sip from a small bowl of water, wiping his brow with the sleeve of his robe. The air smells of cut greens and smoke. He listens and hears only the faint creak of beams, the distant chatter of birds. The monastery lives quietly around him, but here in the apothecary, it is always a little apart. A little slower, a little more like prayer. After the tincture has been labeled and shelved, Brother Aelric begins the next task with familiar hands and a mind at peace. He selects a bundle of dried comfrey leaves, tied in rough twine and crackling with age. These had been harvested in the late spring, their deep green now turned to a quiet, dusty olive. He unties the bundle and places the leaves in a stone mortar, then reaches for a pestle smoothed by years of use. The grinding begins slowly. Each push and press releases the pungent, rooty scent of comfrey, earthy and thick. It fills the small space, mingling with the lingering aromas of smoke, aged herbs, and clean linen. The paste must be finely made. No coarse lumps, no strands of stem. When it is done, he folds the mixture carefully into beeswax that had been warmed earlier over a clay brazier. The salve will help with swelling and bruises, nothing dramatic, nothing miraculous, but gently effective, like most remedies here. Aelric believes in small healings, not in spectacle. He learned this from Brother Petronius, who trained him when he first arrived at the monastery over 20 years ago. Petronius, who used to say, "The Lord works not always in thunder, but often in the turning of a leaf." Once the comfrey salve is smoothed into a small ceramic pot, Aelric affixes a wax seal and sets it aside. The wax is marked with a tiny cross, made with a wooden stamp carved long ago. He places the pot on the lower shelf, where it will be easily reached. When someone comes with bruised hands from work in the fields or a twisted ankle from the steep garden path, there is a knock at the door. Brother Martin enters quietly, his eyes tired, his voice low. "Brother Aelric, Sister Agnes from the convent has arrived with a girl. They ask for your help." Aelric nods. "Bring them to the guest room. I'll gather what's needed." He moves without rush, but with purpose. Into a worn satchel he places the yarrow tincture, the comfrey salve, and a small vial of lavender oil good for calming nerves and troubled breath. He also takes a folded cloth and a strip of bark, soft and dry, used as a compress. The guest room is quiet when he arrives. A young girl sits on the edge of a bench, her face pale, fingers knotted in her lap. Sister Agnes stands behind her, face calm but watchful. Aelric kneels gently beside the girl. "You are safe here," he says, voice low and warm. "May I see your hands?" She opens them. The skin is red and raw, the result of too many hours scrubbing stone floors in the convent's kitchen, perhaps without gloves or rest. Aelric does not scold. He only nods. He takes a damp cloth and gently wipes her hands, then dabs them with lavender oil. The girl does not flinch. He applies the comfrey salve next, using a wooden spatula, slow and even. The herbs do their work quietly. The girl's shoulders loosen just slightly. She blinks and her breath steadies. When he's finished, Aelric offers her a wrapped piece of dried pear and a sip of cool water from a ceramic cup. "You'll mend well," he says. "But rest is the greater medicine." Sister Agnes nods in thanks. No silver changes hands. That is not the way here. Healing, like prayer, is offered without price. Back in the apothecary, Aelric washes his hands in rosewater. A basin carved of old soapstone holds the perfumed water, and beside it, A cloth embroidered long ago by a novice who has since taken final vows. The scent of rose stays on his skin long after the cloth has dried it. He returns to the herbarium once more. The sun is now high. Bees dart from bloom to bloom, industrious and golden. Aelric watches them a moment before kneeling beside the rows of angelica and betony. The angelica will be needed soon, its stems peeled and candied to help with digestion in the infirmary. The betony is a strange little plant, mildly bitter, but known among the monks for its effect on headaches and melancholy. He collects a few sprigs of each and places them gently into the basket hanging from his elbow. He walks the perimeter of the garden before leaving. This is not for duty, but for reverence. He touches the bark of the old yew tree, places a hand briefly on the stone wall that holds the warmth of the sun. These are simple gestures, but they are his own rituals, as sacred in their way as the Mass. Inside again, he sets the fresh herbs to dry on wooden slats in the upper part of the apothecary. The slats are angled to allow the air to move freely so the herbs do not mold. He makes a small note in his logbook. Angelica harvested, betony collected, tincture shelf restocked. His handwriting is small and precise, the ink slightly faded but legible. He stops briefly to eat, a bowl of warm lentils, a crust of bread, a handful of walnuts. He sits on a bench outside the apothecary door, facing the garden. Brother Cuthbert passes again, this time humming softly, a bundle of firewood under one arm. Aelric raises a hand in greeting. In the afternoon, he begins sorting dried herbs into labeled pouches. Chamomile, wormwood, mint, and rosemary. Each goes into its own cloth bag, tied and hung on a peg. This part of the work is quiet and deeply soothing. The repetition, the earthy smells, the soft rasp of cloth and dried leaves, it all invites a kind of inward stillness. Here, Aelric thinks more clearly, not about great theological questions or distant matters of church doctrine, but about hands, breath, healing, and the patient passage of time. A bell rings again, none, the mid-afternoon hour. He stands, bows his head for a moment, and then places his hands on the smooth wood of the table. "Thank you," he whispers, to no one and to everything. As the shadows grow longer and the garden begins its quiet descent into dusk, Brother Aelric turns his attention to the wooden cupboard that holds his most precious ingredients, not because they are rare, but because they require the most care. Inside are bundles of dried elderflower, jars of honey sealed with wax, and tiny linen packets of poppy seeds, tied with string no thicker than thread. Everything here is simple, but purposeful. He takes down a small jar filled with a pale, golden balm lemon balm and beeswax, set to cool weeks earlier. Its surface is smooth, like still water. He opens it and inhales the light, citrusy scent, smiling gently to himself. It has mellowed perfectly. This balm, rubbed on the temples or placed on the chest, eases anxious breath and promotes rest. Many of the brothers ask for it during seasons of fasting or long nights of prayer when the mind grows restless and refuses to quiet. He prepares a few small portions of it, pressing the balm into scallop shell containers, each one cleaned and polished. The shells come from the coast, carried by pilgrims and traded by visiting friars. Their use is both practical and symbolic. The shape reminds the monks of pilgrimage, of motion, of spiritual journey. When the balm is ready, he sets the shells beside his other remedies and writes the date in his log. The hour is late now, and light begins to pour through the west-facing window in long golden beams. Dust drifts in the air, caught in the warm light like tiny prayers. This is Brother Aelric's favorite time of day when the work is nearly done, and the apothecary feels like a vessel filled with stillness. He moves more slowly now, hiding tools, brushing away bits of dried stem and powder, wiping the edge of the preparation table with a damp cloth. Outside the apothecary, someone sings. It's Brother Simon, humming a slow, wordless tune as he walks the cloister walk. The sound echoes faintly through the corridor, softened by age and stone. Aelric listens a moment, then continues his work, comforted by the nearness of others. Though much of his day is spent alone, the presence of the other monks is never far. The monastery is like a single body, each brother a different part, each task sustaining the whole. He steps outside for air. The herb garden is washed in amber light. Bees drift homeward. Aelric walks its edge slowly, fingertips trailing across the top leaves of the rosemary. He stops beside a tall patch of sage and gently breaks a leaf, rolling it between his fingers. The scent is sharp, grounding. He breathes it in and lets it go. As he turns to head back inside, he notices something near the base of the wall, a small mushroom, round and pale, pushing through the damp soil. He kneels, inspects it, does not touch it. Some mushrooms are helpful, others deadly. He marks the spot in his memory. Later, after Compline, he will look it up in the manuscript of fungi drawn long ago by a traveling herbalist. He has always admired that manuscript, its careful illustrations, its Latin names, the deep respect it shows for the power of small things. Back inside, the final tasks await. He prepares a tisane of chamomile and dried fennel to be served in the infirmary later. Into a wide pot he pours spring water, then the herbs, watching as they swirl and release their fragrance. The steam curls upward, fogging the small glass window. When it's ready, he strains it through linen and pours it into a tall jug. This tea, he knows, is not just for the body but for the spirit. Many of the older brothers rest easier with a warm cup beside them in the evening. As he carries the jug down the stone corridor toward the infirmary, his steps echo softly. The walls are lit with oil lamps, their flames low and flickering. The hallway smells of stone, wax, and distant myrrh from the chapel. Inside the infirmary, 3 cots are occupied. Brother Alban, with a twisted knee from slipping on wet stone steps. Brother Nivard, whose lungs have been troubled since winter. And a novice, young Hugh, who has had trouble sleeping. Aelric moves quietly among them, offering each a cup of warm tisane and a soft word. He adjusts blankets, checks their pulses by touch, smooths their brows. He lingers longest beside Brother Nivard. The elder monk is asleep, his breath wheezy but regular. Aelric places a small linen sachet of dried lavender beneath his pillow, a trick Brother Petronius taught him long ago. He whispers a prayer, then steps away. Returning to the apothecary, he finds the room now touched only by candlelight. The day's work is complete. He places the empty jug beside the basin, washes his hands one final time, and stands quietly in the dimness. From a small shelf, he removes a manuscript, his personal collection of herbal observations, compiled over years. Its cover is leather, worn at the corners. Inside, pages are filled with drawings, notes, dates, and reflections. He flips to the section on fungi and locates the mushroom he saw earlier. Agaricus pratum, the text reads. Mild of scent, neutral of nature, avoid use without certainty, he smiles. The wisdom of restraint. Sometimes knowing what not to use is as important as knowing what to prepare. He makes a note, observed near wall early autumn single growth. His pen moves slowly. No rush, the ink dries as he replaces the quill. A knock comes. Brother Thomas stands in the doorway. The prior asks for a balm. His old hands trouble him. Aelric nods. I'll prepare it. He opens the shelf, selects the comfrey and a small vial of elder oil, and begins again, not as duty, but as rhythm, as devotion. The work never truly ends, but neither is it a burden. It is, in its way, prayer. He warms the oil gently, adds the comfrey, stirs with a steady hand. When it's ready, he pours it into a fresh pot, corks it, and wraps it in linen before handing it to Thomas. Tell him to use it after lauds, he says, and not to forget to rest his hands. Thomas smiles, nods, and disappears into the darkening hall. Aelric blows out the last candle, takes one final breath of the air now heavy with sage and steam, and steps into the corridor. His sandals tap softly as he walks toward the chapel. The bell will ring soon for Compline, the final prayers of the day. The apothecary remains behind him, quiet and dark, filled with herbs and echoes, waiting to welcome the next morning with slow, healing work once again. The last bell of the day tolls gently, its tone long and low, floating through the cloister like smoke through still air. Brother Aelric has taken his place in the chapel along with the others. Their chants rise together into the stone vaults, reverent and calm. The candles flicker in niches carved centuries earlier, their wax pooling impatient drips down iron sconces. As the Compline prayer continues, Aelric's eyes rest on the worn hem of the robe of the brother before him, the soft rhythm of breath and voice anchoring him in the present. Compline ends not with fanfare, but with stillness. The monks bow their heads and begin to disperse, feet soft on the cold flagstones. Aelric remains seated a while longer. There is something deeply satisfying in the quiet that follows prayer, as though the very walls are listening. When he finally rises, it is with the gentle fatigue of a day well lived, his limbs heavy, his mind hushed but not dulled. Instead of returning immediately to his cell, Aelric makes one final stop. He moves quietly through the cloister walk, the arched windows black against the night. In his hands he carries a small lantern, its flame muted behind colored glass. He descends the familiar steps once again, entering the apothecary for the last time today. The room is wrapped in darkness, save for the soft flicker of the lantern. Shadows stretch across shelves and dried bundles of herbs. The scent is richer now, concentrated in the cool evening air. Earth, spice, old wood. The garden beyond the stone wall is quiet, sleeping beneath the first hints of frost. Aelric does not enter to work, but simply to sit. He places the lantern on the table and lowers himself onto the stool he has used for years. Its legs creak gently under his weight. He folds his hands in his lap and lets the silence gather. In this room, every object tells a story. The dented brass scale passed down from Brother Petronius, the dried rosemary from last year's feast of Saint Benedict, the carved spoon made by a visiting carpenter, who'd once been healed with a salve from this very shelf. These things are not relics, but companions. They have borne witness to thousands of quiet acts of care. From the far shelf, he retrieves a small tin box, its corners smoothed by time. Inside are folded scraps of parchment, each one containing a note or reflection written over decades. Some are brief, just a line or two. Others are longer, almost letters to himself. He reads a few in silence. Brother Hildebrand recovered after 3 days' tincture of feverfew effective. Praise be. Do not forget the scent of fresh marjoram in morning sun. All healing is in God's hands. We are only the dust upon the path. He smiles. He adds a new slip to the box. Tonight I am grateful for breath, for balm, for this quiet labor. He places the tin back in its place and, after a moment's pause, reaches for a small bundle wrapped in cloth from the back of the drawer. Inside is a tiny carved figure, no more than 2 inches tall, a saint, perhaps, or a pilgrim with a long robe and walking staff. Brother Matthews had given it to him long ago. A reminder, he'd said, that the journey itself is the gift. Aelric traces the contours of the figure's face, worn smooth by fingers over many years, then places it gently back in its wrappings. He closes the drawer. The lantern's flame flickers low. He stands, stretches slowly, and walks once more through the narrow stone passageways. The monastery has gone fully quiet now. Even the wind seems to respect the hour. As he approaches his cell, he passes by the scriptorium, where Brother Elias has left a candle burning beside a half-finished illumination. The gold leaf glints faintly in the dark. Aelric pauses, observes it with silent admiration, and moves on. Inside his room, nothing has changed. The same cot, the same blanket, the same crucifix above. He places the lantern on the floor and removes his sandals. The stone beneath his feet is cold, but familiar. With practiced hands, he unfastens his robe, folds it neatly, and sits on the edge of the bed. He says his final prayer of the day in a whisper, not expecting answers, but simply offering the words into the night. Then he lies down. The blanket is scratchy but warm, and the silence settles around him like a second quilt. In the garden, the herbs continue their slow life. Roots deepen, leaves curl inward, seeds sleep beneath soil and straw. In the apothecary, tinctures steep gently in darkness. Scent clings to the rafters, labels rest in perfect order. The comfrey salve remains ready on the shelf for tomorrow's injury. The balm in scallop shells waits for troubled sleep. And Brother Aelric, herbalist and healer, sleeps too. His breath slows. The day has passed, not in haste, not in thunder, but in a rhythm as old as the monastery itself. One more day lived with reverence and simplicity. The work has been done. The garden has been tended. The sick have been seen. And tomorrow will come quiet as dew on marigold, soft as bees returning to hive.